If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. A lot of you weren't even born when the O.J. Simpson criminal trial went down. I myself was already in my teens at the time, and the first thing I want to say is that it made no sense to me why the white media was sensationalizing this particular incident and this guy in particular. Yes, O.J. Simpson had been a football player. He apparently had been a college sensation and all that. But by the 1990s, about the only thing he was known for was those stupid Naked Gun movies and that he had been in a few Hertz commercials. Ron and Nicole were not some sort of big socialites. They weren't exactly famous. Nobody knew them outside of their little social circle in Los Angeles. And yet the white media was calling this the trial of the century. Never mind the fact that the Lindbergh baby kidnapping had already been called the trial of the century. You also had the Manson trial, Klaus Barbie and such, but the white media, they loved this one in particular. Why? Because O.J. Simpson could be turned into their bogeyman. Everyone knew, though, what was really happening. The white powers that be had failed to get Michael Jackson despite repeated attempts. So they were looking to get a consolation prize, and O.J.'s scalp was supposed to be it. Now, before I go any farther, I know that there's going to be some slowcoasts here who don't exactly understand what the message is, and they're going to be getting on their kick saying, well, wasn't O.J. Simpson married to a white woman? The white media didn't care about that. This is not about O.J. I know we got some people who are going to focus on who he was married to, and while that's certainly valid to a point, it's even more valid that the white media wanted to go after this guy for reasons all their own. They could push a lot of buttons by going after O.J. Simpson. Now, contrary to popular belief, at the time of the trial, the white media did not hate O.J. Simpson. Sure, they were going after the man, and they definitely wanted him to go to prison, but they didn't have this all-encompassing, all-consuming hatred of the man, at least not for the criminal trial. See, the white media, they figured that the trial was nothing more than a formality. It was already a fait accompli that O.J. Simpson was going to be convicted. There was no chance that he wouldn't be found guilty because the white media made sure to stack the deck against him. They made sure to give all the airtime possible to Fred Goldman. They wanted to make it clear this was a story they were telling. This wasn't a news event that was being covered. It was a story being told. And the story was the big bad nigga who was sleeping with this white woman, and then he goes and kills these two white people. Sure, the LAPD, they broke the chain of custody for the evidence 5 ways from Sunday. Sure, the lead detective, the guy who was actually investigating the case, was a stone-cold racist. And sure, the prosecution was about as incompetent as you could possibly ask for. But the guy was guilty because they needed him to be. This was about reinforcing a social narrative. It was about reassuring the society that, okay, Michael Jackson might have gotten away, but we're still in charge, and we'll use O.J. Simpson as an example of that. So, when the trial didn't go the way that they wanted it to, that hurt them to their souls. That's when the hatred of O.J. began. That's when the white media's all-consuming hatred of him actually started. They hated O.J., but more they hated Johnny Cochran. Johnny Cochran was the guy most responsible for making sure that this nigger got away. The white media had been heavily pushing their anti-black narrative, and so what Johnny Cochran intelligently did was he used that trial as a platform to go ahead and put all these racists and bigots on trial. And that's exactly what he was supposed to do. He was supposed to remind people what this was really about. O.J. Simpson was nothing more than a proxy for the black community, and he understood that. Johnny Cochran knew exactly what kind of defense to put on, and he did. You can't argue with the defense. There's no way to argue with it. Johnny Cochran's defense for O.J. Simpson was that the LAPD are a bunch of racists. They can't stand black people. They hate O.J. Simpson because he was sleeping with a white woman, and they were out to get him because they're all a bunch of racists. Now, of course, the white media didn't like that. Oh, no, you can't say that these good white cops happen to be racist. Why, that's impossible. Yeah, they were saying this 30 years ago. Long before Blue Lives Matter. But Johnny Cochran and F. Lee Bailey and others, they were able to get that audio recording of Mark the racist neo-Nazi Furman admitting that he can't stand black people. He pulls over black men who drive nice cars, and that if he had his way, he would put every black person in America on a boat and take the boat out to sea and set it on fire and blow it up. That's what the bastard said. So, what was Johnny Cochran's defense? That the cops are racist as hell, and he took the lead detective on the case and said, I got audio of this guy saying all this anti-black racist stuff, how he hates black people and all the rest of it. He proved his case. He proved that the LAPD was absolutely riddled with racists and that the O.J. Simpson investigation was nothing more than a bunch of racists and bigots who decided they were going to hang this on him. No matter what anyone may think of Johnny Cochran or his defense, you can't argue with the fact that he actually proved what he said he was going to prove. And all these idiots could do was just say, well, that doesn't matter. Yeah, because it wasn't about the evidence. It wasn't even about the murders. What it was about was reinforcing an anti-black narrative. That's the reason why O.J. Simpson became this perennial obsession for the white powers that be. After the criminal trial, then came the civil trial with the outrageous amount that was assigned to it. Oh yeah, they were making it very clear. You absolutely hurt our souls. We didn't get the ending that we wanted. This nigger was supposed to be convicted, and we were going to laugh and say, see, the justice system works. Oh, well, the justice system still works when he's acquitted, right? No, the system's broken. Oh, now it's broken. See, it's important to remember. For those of you who may not be old enough to know, the O.J. Simpson trial came after the Rodney King verdict. And you gotta understand, the Rodney King verdict, that was an example of an actual crime in which it was obvious who the guilty was, and that the justice system was shown to be a complete and thorough joke, racist as hell. So when O.J. Simpson came along later, the same people who were telling black folks, wagging their fingers in our faces and saying, you gotta believe in the system even when it doesn't give you the verdict you want. Keep in mind, these are the same racists who, as far as they were concerned, Rodney King deserved what happened to him. And the cops were heroes. They did not at all believe that those racist thugs who assaulted Rodney King should have been punished. In fact, they felt quite the opposite. They'd be the main ones saying, well, wasn't he involved in some sort of high-speed chase with the police? Didn't he, flee the scene or something? That's what they actually believe. So when you come to them and say, well, O.J. Simpson, there's a case of you got to believe in the system. They say, oh, hell no, the system's wrong. The system's broken. We need new laws. Oh, now we need new laws for this. Yeah, because they understand that the job of the police is not to serve and protect. The job of the police is to control the black population through unrestrained violence. Violence that they can commit with impunity due to the approbation of the state. That's the job of the police. It is not to uphold the law, it is to uphold white supremacy. Their job is not to stop crime. Their job is to oppress and brutalize black citizens. That's their actual job, and everybody knows it. So when the O.J. Simpson criminal verdict came back and he was acquitted, those same people, they were fit to be tied. You had racists like Jeffrey Jerkum Tubin. He was the one who coined the phrase playing the race card. And that was when CNN decided that this guy was the greatest thing since sliced bread. They loved the fact that he was going to go ahead and say all this racial stuff that a lot of the commentators wished that they could say on CNN, but didn't. But just go ahead and bring Jeffrey Tubin in. He'll go ahead and spew the anti-black venom for you. He'll go ahead and do that, which he did. And of course, because of the fact that there is such a thing as karma in this universe, everybody found out that Jeffrey Jerkum Tubin is nothing more than a putrid little pervert. And that's all he'll be remembered for. But the obsession over O.J. Simpson wasn't over yet. I mean, for God's sake, they were calling the police on the guy every chance they got. And the white media was just sitting there drooling with anticipation. We gotta have something to get him on. We need a do-over. We need a do-over. That's what they were interested in. They wanted a do-over. But they wouldn't get one, not for many, many years. And then you had the incident in Las Vegas, where O.J. Simpson was arrested and charged with a crime because he was trying to reclaim his own property. But of course, as we all know, this had nothing to do with any alleged taking of property or threatening anyone. This was the do-over that so much of white society was waiting for. They were desperately hoping for it. Now, keep in mind, by the time they got around to O.J.'s Las Vegas trial, it didn't matter. The time to get O.J. Simpson was in the 1990s if you were going to do it. So by the time they got around that Las Vegas trial, it didn't matter. O.J. Simpson was old hat. Besides, they'd been calling the police on him every 5 minutes. Everyone knew that they had it in for him, and they were just simply looking for any opportunity to go ahead and put some charges on him because that was going to be the do-over that they were waiting for. But it was completely and thoroughly anticlimactic. The people who actually wanted to see a conviction of O.J. Simpson, sure, they went ahead and they got to have their little sugar rush. But what they really wanted was for the black community to be hurt by it. They wanted to throw it in the black community's face. But after over a decade, it didn't matter anymore. Just like in the 1990s, the obsession with O.J. Simpson had absolutely nothing to do with the man himself and everything to do with the anti-black narrative. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that O.J. Simpson is somehow on the side of black empowerment. This man, he made it very clear that he was trying to distance himself from the black community, so he put himself into the trick bag over and over. But this is about how white power was trying to use him. Using these famous Negroes as nothing more than proxies for the black community. The trials in America are largely rigged. I've talked in the past about how there's a psychology that goes along with the selection of the jury, the voir dire process. And that being the case, this is how you know with all of these cops who harm and murder black people, prosecutors, all they have to do is just simply sit back and allow the defense to choose whoever the heck they want to be on that jury, and you've already slanted the trial in the favor of the defense. Prosecutors understand that. It's one of their favorite little tactics. Go ahead and let the defense just run the boards and choose their own jury, and that way, when they come back with an acquittal, you can go, oh, well, we tried. You see what happened? We tried. But you see, the people just didn't believe the evidence, so you got to accept it. And that's the reason why it's been going on the last several years, actually showing people the dirty stuff the prosecutors do, like Daniel Cameron when he covered up the murder of Breonna Taylor and others. Now people are seeing the stuff that the prosecutors do in their tricks. And that being the case, the juries can no longer be depended on to come back with the verdict that the prosecutors want. That doesn't mean that they can't get it, period. But it means that the juries can't be depended on anymore. And that's the reason why there's been this complete reversal of fortune where these trials of the police are concerned. The cops went from being untouchable to now you might as well go ahead and call the penitentiary and make reservations. That's the reason why, because enough of the public saw it, and the prosecutors now understand that when they deal with these juries, okay, maybe the jury might rule in favor of the cop, but it's not guaranteed anymore. There's a psychology when it comes to picking the jury. Johnny Cochran certainly understood that. That's why he fought tooth and nail to get as many black people, particularly to make sure that there were going to be some black men on that jury, some black folks who were there and not trying to find some way to appease the powers that be. He wanted O.J. Simpson to be tried by a jury of his peers. That means the black community. See, whenever it comes to white defendants, you have never seen a white defendant being tried by an all-black jury or even majority black jury. They make sure that black people in general and black men in specific are completely and thoroughly precluded from being on these juries. They don't want black people standing in judgment of a white defendant for any reason. It's going to be an all-white jury, and nobody has a problem with that. Oh yeah, you can have a white defendant being tried by nothing but white people, and well, it doesn't matter if this happens in, say, Detroit. Or if it happens in Memphis or Atlanta or some other majority black enclave, if it's a white defendant, well, they're going to be tried by a white jury. There will still be no black people on that jury regardless. And that's a jury of their peers. And this is what we saw in Las Vegas, though. You had the white media and those prosecutors and everybody else. They were all jolly and giddy when they sarcastically claimed O.J. Simpson's being tried by a jury of his peers. That jury was almost entirely white women in the Las Vegas trial. That was, of course, done deliberately as a matter of, oh, this guy, we said that he killed a white woman, so we're going to make sure that there are white women who are standing in judgment of him. And speaking of white women, we would be remiss if we didn't mention Marcia Clark. Marcia Clark, by the way, is Jewish. If you've ever read her autobiography, and I suffered through it so you wouldn't have to, she made like the pilgrimage to Israel and all the rest of it. But Marcia Clark, who got some of the worst plastic surgery I've ever seen, and who, by the way, was bumping uglies with Chris Darden back in the day, this woman, she was just psychologically scarred. Her soul was scarred by the O.J. Simpson criminal trial, and the reason why was she was supposed to have a slam dunk case. Why? He's a black man. That makes it a slam dunk. And the reason that her behind was burned is because she basically has to carry the stigma, such as it is, that she was the one who lost the war. You're the reason that nigger got away. Well, the truth of the matter was she didn't have a case to begin with. And when you consider that the chain of custody was broken a number of times where the evidence is concerned, once chain of custody is broken, that evidence is not supposed to be admitted. But this happened a number of times because the LAPD was not actually putting together a case, they were manufacturing a case. So of course there were going to be breaks in the chain of custody. Of course there was going to be evidence that mysteriously showed up in one place, popped up in another, and don't worry, now is just conveniently slanted against the defendant. That's American justice. Look, O.J. Simpson is no martyr. He is certainly no hero of black empowerment. But keep in mind, the same white media and the white powers that be that were after him, they weren't concerned with O.J. Simpson. And while the way that he lived his life was certainly not laudatory, Nonetheless, you can't help but agree with the verdict in that criminal trial. And what it exposed about Los Angeles and America, that's what it's really about. If only there had been a new black media then to at least speak on these things. But that's part of the reason why I decided to bring it up. You see, the O.J. Simpson criminal trial and the white media's blatant bias and bigotry all throughout it, that was a large part of the reason why I would come to question and later on just disbelieve any and all white media narratives. I decided to go ahead and find information for myself because it was a matter of if you knew all of these facts about the case and the white media just decided we're not talking about it, then you have to ask, what else have they been telling us? What else has been just wholesale swallowed and believed by people for generations, and nobody was questioning that one either? Things like my video about the truth about Robert Mugabe. Part of the reason why I had no problem speaking the unspoken for someone who had been completely and thoroughly demonized by the white media was because I had seen it before. And just like with O.J. Simpson, I would hardly say that Robert Mugabe had been on the side of the angels for most of his life. Sure, he did some of the right things later on, but nonetheless. This is why it's important that we go ahead and talk about the O.J. Simpson trial. The white media is dancing all over the man's grave. Of course they were going to, because they didn't get what they wanted. And when white supremacy takes an L, they never get over it. White supremacy is ultimately fragile and weak. That's the reason why it hyper-obsesses over making sure that it controls black people. Even a 98-pound weakling will seem strong if he has somebody else who he's broken their legs, starved them pretty much to death, and they got this person in traction. Then under those circumstances, even the proverbial 98-pound weakling would seem strong by comparison. And that's exactly what we've been seeing when it comes to these narratives about the black community. So when white supremacy takes an L, they are absolutely scarred by that because they're not supposed to take any L's at all. It's supposed to all go their own way. That's why it's called white supremacy. That's the reason why the O.J. Simpson trial was not merely a shock to them with the outcome, but it absolutely terrified them. Because they understand if it can happen once, it can happen all the time. And when you have a system in place that is bestowed on a certain demographic goodies, giveaways, and guarantees, well, they want to also be perpetually reassured that the house of cards is not in any danger of falling anytime real soon. So what happens when a black man named Johnny Cochran walks in the courtroom and you got black jurors who are actually there on the jury when they see that, no, you're going to have to actually earn this win. It's not going to be handed to you. No guarantees here. Well, what the result is, you get a bunch of unhinged racists in the white media and in academia and in politics who simply could not believe or accept the fact that the system actually worked the way that it was supposed to. You're supposed to be able to go into court, make a defense, and if you can prove your defense, you're supposed to be acquitted. They don't like that. This is about getting guaranteed outcomes that are meant to reassure the dominant society. But instead, the only thing that they found was it's possible to have justice in an American court, and they've been fighting every day ever since to try to reverse that. So for you younger cats here who are seeing all of this phony hysteria about O.J. Simpson, this is the same white media that took it on the chin 30 years ago. Here they are trying to reassure themselves that they're still in control, they're still in charge. Oh, O.J. Simpson, he didn't win anything. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. That's the problem that they have. They're supposed to be in complete and thorough control. They're the ones who define what reality is. They say what's real and what's not. But in this case, you had at least 2 black men. Well, in the case of O.J. Simpson, 1.5. And these guys, they actually were able to go into a courtroom. They were able to defy the white media, defy the white powers that be, and they actually got a judicial verdict based on the law and not based on white fiat. Now, can you imagine what the result would have been if there had been a robust new black media in place back then? How different things would be. That's the point of this Sunday address. All of this falderall and all of this phony outrage about O.J. Simpson, what it's actually about is people who saw the crack in their power for just an instant. Sunlight was actually able to get into the courtroom for just an instant, and for those vampires in there, that was far too long and far too much. So if they want to spend their time now dancing on O.J. Simpson's grave, they can go ahead and have at it. I'm certainly not going to be stopping them or defending the man. But they need to understand that the days of being able to just hang some black person in effigy and use them as just a proxy for the black community, in times past, we didn't push back as hard against that kind of thing as we should have. But now there's a new generation who's pushing back against it and doesn't give a rip what the white media or the white powers that be think about it. And that being the case, well, maybe we can truthfully say that O.J. Simpson inadvertently managed to do some good for the black community after all. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Michael Ray, Sakina Collins, LB, Alice Ransom, and Eve. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.